Let's dive right in. Today, we are completely dismantling the romantic myth of Pompeii as this peaceful city simply frozen in time. Instead, in this explainer, we're going to reveal it for what it truly is, a precise, catastrophic, and deeply active scientific archive. We are looking at a multi-phase geological event that created an unparalleled time capsule. Section 1. The October Mystery. A calendar corrected. Okay, let's set the scene. The year is 79 CE. To the 15,000 citizens of Pompeii, Vesuvius was not a threat. It was just a peaceful green mountain looming over their vibrant world, covered in terraced vineyards. Fun fact, the Romans didn't even have a word for volcano. But deep beneath the Gulf of Naples, a disaster was brewing, and it was entirely driven by one specific molecule, silica. Now, unlike the gentle, free-flowing lava you might picture in Hawaii, Vesuvius was a dormant stratovolcano filled with high silica magma. Silica acts as a polymerizing agent. It forms these complex molecular chains that make the magma incredibly sticky and viscous. And that sticky magma, it trapped expanding gas bubbles. Think of it exactly like the carbonation trapped inside a violently shaken bottle of champagne. The pressure was just mounting and mounting against a dense plug of solid rock from previous ancient eruptions. Now here is where modern forensics absolutely busts a 500-year-old historical myth. For centuries, textbooks told us the eruption happened on August 24th. That date was based on medieval translations of letters by an eyewitness, Pliny the Younger. But archaeologists kept finding things that just didn't make sense for a sweltering southern Italian August. They were finding carbonized autumnal fruits, like dried figs and chestnuts. Victims were wearing heavy woolen clothing. And recently, they even found a freshly minted silver coin that literally could not have existed before September of that year. Anchoring this whole corrected timeline is an incredibly fragile micro-narrative. Back in 2018, archaeologists found this simple charcoal inscription scrawled by a worker on a house wall that was undergoing renovations. It translates to October 17th. Now, think about charcoal for a second. It's highly fragile, right? It smudges, it fades easily. There is simply no way this inscription could have survived on an exposed wall for months. It tells us, for sure, that the disaster struck just days later, likely around October 24th. So, piecing this together, the Earth actually tried to warn the Pompeians. In 62 CE, massive earthquakes shattered the region, but the Romans just rebuilt, totally unaware of the connection to the volcano. Then, on October 24th, 79 CE, that silica-rich pressure finally shattered the stone plug, blasting a supersonic jet of gas, rock, and ash 30 kilometers into the stratosphere. Section 2. The Physics of Death. Beyond Suffocation. Moving into the Pelian phase of the eruption, the true killer of Pompeii actually wasn't the falling pumice that buried the streets on the first day. The absolute agent of destruction was the pyroclastic density current. During the early hours of the second day, that massive eruption column high in the atmosphere could no longer support its own weight, so it collapsed. This sent a turbulent, low-density cloud of toxic gas and fine ash surging down the mountain, sweeping right over the city walls at hurricane speeds. When the fourth of these pyroclastic surges hit Pompeii, it wasn't just fast, it was unimaginably hot. We are talking about a fast-moving cloud of fine ash at staggering temperatures of 250 to 300 degrees Celsius. To put that in perspective, that is up to 570 degrees Fahrenheit. And here is a crucial point where we really need to correct a massive popular myth. Pop culture almost always depicts victims coughing, right? Slowly suffocating under falling ash. Well, the reality is that death was instantaneous. The sheer thermal energy caused instantaneous thermal shock, literally coagulating cellular proteins on the spot. It caused a phenomenon called cadaveric spasm, where intense heat locks the muscles instantly into rigid, lifelike defensive poses. At the same time, the fine ash instantly created a cement-like paste in the lungs. It was an immediate, overwhelming end. No slow suffocation whatsoever. Section 3. The Chemistry of the Void. A Paradox of Destruction. Now, this is an incredible scientific paradox. The exact same temperatures and fine cohesive ash that violently destroyed the city are exactly what sterilized and preserved it. When the ash settled, it packed tightly around the victims. Because the heat totally sterilized the environment, normal bacterial decay was halted. Over centuries, the soft tissues slowly dissolved away through the porous soil, leaving behind exact hollow cavities in the hardened ash. In 1863, a guy named Giuseppe Fiorelli realized these weren't just random holes in the ground. First, they would locate a cavity with metal rods, drill a small hole, and then pour liquid plaster of Paris inside. Once it hardened, they chipped away the ash. He essentially transformed empty subterranean cavities into physical, negative spaces of human tragedy, capturing exact facial expressions and even the folds of their clothing. And this crazy level of preservation extended perfectly to everyday life too, because the pyroclastic surge completely cut off all oxygen while subjecting ovens to intense heat. Things like a baker's loaf of bread didn't just burn to ash. Its organic moisture was driven out, and the carbohydrates converted to pure carbon. It became a piece of charcoal, perfectly shaped like a segmented Roman loaf, even preserving the stamp with the name of an enslaved baker for 2 millennia. Section 4. A Tale of Two Cities, Pompeii versus Herculaneum. To truly understand why Pompeii's empty voids are so unique, we have to look at how proximity changes the geology entirely. Herculaneum, Pompeii's sister city, sat much closer to the volcano. Because of that, it was hit by an extremely dense 500 degrees Celsius mud surge. This heat was so intense it instantly vaporized soft human tissues and carbonized wooden furniture, roofs, and famously, thousands of papyrus scrolls. But because it turned the whole city into a solid, subterranean stone block, it prevented the creation of those delicate, hollow cavities we find in Pompeii's slightly cooler, dry ash. So 2 cities, 1 volcano, but 2 completely different chemical archives. Section 5. DNA Rewrites History, the 2024 Revelations. All right, let's move from 19th century plaster casts to our intellectual climax. For over a century, researchers looked at the physical poses of these plaster casts and, well, they projected their own contemporary Western ideals of the nuclear family onto them. A cast with a gold bracelet holding a child, they dubbed it the mother and child. 2 figures embracing in their final moments, labeled the 2 sisters. But when geneticists finally extracted ancient DNA from these highly fragmented remains in 2024, the reality was entirely different. That mother, actually an unrelated adult male. The sisters included at least 1 genetic male. It turns out, physical appearance and proximity were completely unreliable indicators of biological relationships. What you should really take away from this is how crucial objective data is to history. The DNA extracted from those 14 casts show that the majority of these victims actually descended from Eastern Mediterranean immigrants. We are talking about people from Greece, Anatolia, and the Levant. This genetic data doesn't diminish the emotional tragedy of Pompeii at all. If anything, it greatly enriches it. It proves that Pompeii wasn't just some neat, localized, homogeneous town. It was a highly integrated, cosmopolitan, and diverse Roman community of citizens, travelers, and enslaved people, all dying side by side. So, to quickly summarize this unparalleled sequence of events, it started with the chemistry of that sticky, high silica magma. The Plinian column buried the city in pumice, which then led to those deadly gravity-driven surges. Thermal shock locked the victims in place, while the fine ash hermetically sealed them in a dry, sterile environment. Then, over centuries, soft tissues dissolved to leave those perfect hollow voids, just waiting to be found. It is an absolutely unique geological sequence.
Please like and subscribe.